Hi everybody. I just want to touch base as a quick reminder on how to evaluate our sources. And I know we covered this quite a bit last week, but it never hurts to have another refresher because often when we're doing research, we continually look for additional resources, or maybe the resources that we found were not exactly 100%. There's my fan. What we were looking for to support our argument. And even if you don't do the Craap test again for any of our resources, this information will be valuable as you continue on in your education and your career. Now, as an HU, we encourage the use of the Craap test, and I know it's kind of a silly sounding word, but it's really effective in judging our credibility as you guys are finding out as we apply it to the sources that we've used. But to just kind of go over what it is we're looking for in terms of credibility, we want to look for the C first, for currency. What that means is we want to find sources that have been published in a relevant time frame. Typically, we don't want to look for something that's been more than 5 years, especially with anything that's medically related. But of course, there's some leeway depending on the type of paper that we're looking for, the type of research that we're looking for. If we're doing a historical perspective, for example, maybe a primary resource from, say, when the Titanic sank would be valuable if we're doing a research paper on the Titanic. So pay attention to when that source was published and make sure that it is relevant to the type of search that you're doing. Okay. The R in our Craap test is relevance. We want to make sure that the sources are relevant to your subject. Does the information relate to your project or answer any of the questions that your topic might raise? Are there other sources out there that you could use that would be perhaps be a better source instead of this one? For example, the one that they provide, a source that only briefly mentions your topic, might not be relevant enough to use. So if you've got like a 20-page source and only page 1 mentions your topic, then maybe we should go out and find something that is more focused on that topic. Another good example is, say that we are doing a research or persuasive argument on why the Titanic sank. We're probably not going to go look into the American Journal of Nursing for resources, so make sure that your resource is relevant to your topic. The first A in our Craap test is authority. We want to make sure that we can trust the authority of the source that we're using. We want to be aware of who the author is. We always want to have an author. For that matter, we want to have an author or a credible organization. For example, Anonymous is not an author, and Associated Press is not necessarily a credible author because we don't have any names with that, right? But beyond having a name on that byline, we want to make sure that the authors can be trusted with what they're talking about. We'll go back to the Titanic example. If we're doing a research or persuasive paper on how that the Titanic ship sank, we might look for experts in engineering. We won't necessarily refer to documents or artifacts written by a medical doctor. So make sure that the authors are present, but also that they are an authority that you can trust. And sometimes we want to kind of dig a little bit deeper than that name and maybe see if that author has any credentials to them. Are they a certified engineer or are they a medical doctor? So make sure that we have authoritative authors that we can trust, that they know what they're talking about. The second A in our Craap test stands for accuracy. Sometimes this feels like it should go without saying, but sometimes it can be more challenging to determine the accuracy of a resource that we're using. We want to make sure that the information we're basing our argument on is credible and accurate. We don't want to have outlandish claims. If we're falling back on that Titanic example, we don't want to say, or we don't want to refer to an article that is saying that the Titanic did not sink because of an iceberg, that the Titanic sank because a giant meteor came and hit it, right? That's an outlandish example, of course, but we do want to make sure that the information is accurate. Another way to pay attention to the accuracy of a source is to make sure that they are using evidence, that they are using resources that are credible to support the accuracy of what they're saying. The last letter in our little acronym here is purpose. You want to consider the purpose of the sources that you're citing. Was the purpose of that article to inform, to educate? Maybe it was to entertain. Maybe it's a satirical article on why the Titanic sank and how that's a comparison to capitalism or something like that. Maybe that is not going to be the best source to use if we're trying to argue why the Titanic sank. So make sure you're aware of the purpose of your article. And that is the Craap test. And what we want to do is kind of go through and score all of these. The details are, of course, in our Mind Edge. activities. But even if we do a cursory glance at this acronym and kind of seek this information out and all of the resources that we use, we are more likely to have credible resources. And I'm going to close this little video with a question that I often get. As novice writers who are just learning how to do persuasive arguments or beginner research papers, why do we care so much about the credibility of the sources that we're using? We're just students writing student papers. And that's true, although I will always discourage you from ever saying the phrase just a student. Being a student is amazing, challenging, and full of hard work, so you are awesome students. And we need to have credible resources, because if we rely on non-credible resources, we are invalidating our own credibility as an author. If we use untrustworthy sources, we ourselves become untrustworthy, and our audience isn't going to listen to us. So let's make sure that we're using credible resources. Let's check with the Craap method. And if you ever have any questions at all, if a source is credible or not, you can always hit me up. And you can always connect with the Shapiro Library as well. You guys got this. It's going to be awesome.